set. All right. Welcome to the September 1st meeting of the Eureka Springs Historic District Commission. I'm Steve Holyfield, standing in as chairman tonight. Commissioners present tonight are myself, Marty Cogan, Maggie Haid, Randy Maddox, and Judy Hold'em. We do have a quorum for business. The Eureka Springs Historic District Commission is empowered by the Eureka Springs Municipal Code to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the alterations of exterior architectural features, demolition, and new construction within the historic district. We use the Eureka Springs Historic District Design Guidelines and the U.S. Secretary of Interior Standards for the treatment of historic properties as the basis for our decisions. The Commission can take the following actions on an application: approval of modifications, denial, or deferral for more information. Appeal or denial may be made to the Circuit Court. Public comments will be heard on each agenda item as called. Other public comments are best addressed to the City Council. Do we have any changes for tonight's agenda?
On new business, level 2, we will be omitting that as it has been postponed.
Number 4?
Number 4
Number 4, sorry.
and number 7.
And number 7,
Okay.
it has also been postponed, the conceptual review discussion.
All right, so we're not going to do number 4, level 2, 32 Mountain, or number 7, conceptual review. I'm sorry? Yeah.
New construction.
Okay. I have a motion for approval of the agenda then as modified.
Go ahead.
I make the motion to approve the new business and the agenda as modified.
Second.
Judy made the motion and Maggie seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Carries. Under new business, we have the following items. There is no old business. New business, all level 2s. Number 1, 151 Spring Street, restore facade, replace rear decks. Number 2, 217 North Main, replace existing roofs with metal. Number 3, 15 Amity fence replacement. Number 5, 22 Eccles, add shed. Number 6, 221 Spring fence replacement. And number 8, discussion of cabin at Historic Museum.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, number 8, I thought that was discussed and decided upon last year. So, I mean, what is there to discuss?
I received a message from Jeff Danos, and he requested that it be added to the agenda. I think they've had potentially some new developments with the cabin, and he wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay. It's really falling down. Okay. First up, 151 Spring Street. Anybody here representing 151? Please step up to the mic and give us your name.
Travis Holloway for Mike Phillip.
Okay.
The property at 151 Spring Street is a circa 1892 commercial building that contributes to the Eureka Springs Historic District. W.I. Sanford, constructed and operated the building as a lodging house, and the building later housed retail stores and art studios. The front facade and side porches were altered from the original design at an unknown time between construction and the mid-20th century. The rear decks were constructed in the early 1990s and should not be considered historic. The applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to return the shed roof front porch on the facade to its original design as a 2-story porch with metal and concrete. The porch decorations will be used in the restoration. The 2nd-story window, which is not original to the building, will return to an original single-door configuration. They are also seeking to rebuild the back deck with treated lumber and cedar posts. Railing will be wood and horizontal cable. In evaluating this request for the alterations at 151 Spring Street, staff makes the following findings of fact. The facade has been highly altered with the loss of character-defining two-story porch and second-story door. A return to the design documented in historic photos aligns with the building's established period of significance. The alterations to the rear are distinctly new construction and affect features that are not historic. The proposed alterations align with standards and guidelines and are returning the building to its period of significance. Staff recommend approval of this agenda item.
Do I hear a motion? Anybody?
You find it. You have to flip up.
What was the motion?
I move that the Historic District Commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work at 151 Spring Street as proposed.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion, questions?
I have a few, points, questions and all. When you say the window on the second story being returned to a door, you're talking about the west facade, the southern opening, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I noticed in the little brochure from when it was a boarding house, it appears to me that the deck wrapped around and toward the back where there was a jut out, there was also a door back there too. Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
Were you planning on doing that too, or is it currently a window?
They're both currently windows, but we're not planning to take the deck all the way to the back left side.
So it won't go all the way, it won't extend all the way back there anymore, is what
No.
you're saying? Okay.
We might possibly if the budget allows us to do that,
Okay.
but we're just doing the front right now.
And also for maybe I just don't remember from the packet, but reconstruction, the deck in the back, you said it was built in 90 or 80, I forget which.
I don't know when the back deck was constructed.
But it was
It's
new.
new.
Yeah. And are you proposing to rebuild it exactly the way that it is right now? Except for you had the metal, right? It's a little more modern construction. Is that what we're?
Same size and shape, yes.
Yeah. So was it 3 levels?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just 3 stories.
Okay.
Right now, each level has a different type of handrail, so we're going to put it all back to consistent.
And that's where you have the metal cables running?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I guess one last question for me. The structural support at the front of the second-story balcony right now is clearly a very, like 1950s metal, with all the ornate, I don't know if there's a term for it, I'm sure.
It's kind of like an acorn design. We're planning to incorporate that in the new. We're planning to save it, and we've actually found new metal looks just like it, and we're going to incorporate that into the new design.
So it'll be the same look that it currently is. You're not trying to take that back in time, is what you're saying.
We're hoping to reuse some of the parts that are there, yes.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Sorry.
Do you have, if I'm missing it, I'm sorry, but could you tell me what kind of door that you'll be replacing it? Instead
It'll
of the
be a
window?
wood door, but we don't have that yet, and it's going to be a custom door because it's so narrow.
Okay.
But we'll definitely do wood and glass. Probably full view glass.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right, take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
I said,
Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next up is 217 North Main, replacing existing roofs with metal. Anybody representing 217 North Main?
Travis Holloway for Pat Fitzsimmons.
Okay.
The 3 buildings at 217 North Main were constructed in 1993 and include several nods to folk Victorian architecture. The applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to replace the existing roofing with metal. In evaluating the request for alterations at 217 North Main, staff makes the following findings of fact. As a non-historic, non-contributing building, the proposed roofing is appropriate. Staff does recommend using a darker color of metal roofing as proposed in guidelines to align with the neighborhood. The proposed alterations align with standards and guidelines. Staff recommend approval of this agenda item.
Can I see that page back there? The one I handed.
I move that the Historic District Commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work at 217 North Main as proposed.
Second.
Judy made the motion, Maggie seconded. Any comments, questions?
I have a question. You just said something, Kylie, that I missed when I was looking at the material, and you're saying you recommended a darker color than what? And what would we be approving if it is approved as stated?
So Travis had contacted me earlier. Did you bring that color sample with you?
Yes.
And what is and not only what is it, but what is the standard behind it?
Guidelines are vague. They just say that darker colors are more historically appropriate. So I would say anything from, a darker gray, brown, black, something like that. Galvanized steel would not be an appropriate choice. Lighter tans would probably not be appropriate as well.
But it's the copper metallic, right? Did I say?
Yes, we're going to ask for copper metallic, but if it doesn't pass, we're going to go to like the burnished slate or something darker on the top.
Copper is a historically, that existed as a roofing type historically, so I think depending on the types of panels that they are proposing, that would be an appropriate color choice.
And that brings me to my question. What kind of metal roof is this?
That's an R-lock.
It's the R-lock here.
Is that standing seam, H-lock?
It shows on the bottom there's an R panel. It's like 3 feet wide, overlapping.
So this is the type that has the metal screws that you'll see them on the
Yes.
top? What's our guideline say about metal roofs? Kylie?
I am...
Okay, I'm sorry.
You're fine. So in the Historic District, Guideline C under roofing says, lap panel interlock steel roofing is not considered appropriate for most existing residential structures. It may be appropriate on some commercial buildings, some ancillary buildings, and some new construction. This is D, since the Historic District is so eclectic, lap panel steel and other types of roofing materials not listed, as well as roofing color and pattern, will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. The criteria that are listed is consistency with historic fabric of the surrounding neighborhood, consistency and appearance with the architectural style of the structure, and then documented proof that this material resembles the original roofing material, which doesn't apply since this is relatively new construction.
So basically, our guidelines say this kind of roof is not appropriate unless it's commercial, sometimes for commercial or new builds. We had someone come before this commission a few months ago, and they asked for permission to do the snap lock standing seam system, and then they put on this system, which was inappropriate. So so our guidelines said this system is not approvable for residential. Is that what I'm reading? That's what I understand, right?
My interpretation of this is it can be taken on a case-by-case basis. This is not historic and non-contributing. You might consider the location along North Main where this is, the nearby structures, the type of roofing that they have. I think that it would be appropriate, but this is up to the commission's interpretation of that guideline.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
I'm not 100% clear on the color question, though. I mean, that, you said copper is a historic material, naturally. I mean, but we're not dealing with a historic building. And I'm just wondering, is there, from our perspective of the guidelines, a reason to say that one of these colors is more appropriate from the other? And I haven't heard that. I haven't picked up on that as something that I should extract.
So, again, roofing color can be taken on a case-by-case basis, but Guideline A under roofing states that historic materials range from light brown to much darker colors. Today's roofing comes in many colors, but the darker shades are recommended as having a more historic look. That being said, tin roofs, copper roofs, other metals with various colors
Yeah.
did exist during the time period that this district represents. So I think that, again, that's kind of an interpretation point.
Do you have a sample of the
Yep,
type of roofing?
they have it right here.
Yes.
Picture of it.
And I'm less familiar with the style of the R-lock as opposed to the standing seam and those sorts of things. Is less familiar than you are.
Also called
Do they-
H-lock. There's a couple of different systems, but it's called standing seam, or there's another name for it. But the really difference, when you look at a roof, if you see a bunch of screw heads sticking up, it's not standing seam. It's
The
flat
R-lock
panel.
looks like if you have standing seam on one end of a spectrum and corrugated, like wavy metal on the other end, it's a little bit closer that way as far as texture.
What's the gauge of the metal?
I'm not sure, might have checked on that. I think it's 26 gauge.
26.
But that particular panel is an upgrade from the regular R panel. It's 12-inch centers versus the 8-inch centers.
Could you repeat to me, please, what you said? If we said no to the copper, what would the alternative be? You said a slate or?
Probably it's in the top right corner, like a burnished slate.
On that paper.
Okay.
I'd have to take it back to the owner and ask her. I don't know if you consider budgets or not when you make your decisions, but the one we're proposing is approximately $13,000 per roof. And if you go to a horizon lock or a hidden fasten, it's going to be double. So it'll be about $26,000 to $30,000 per roof.
Okay.
We'll give it back to you. Go. Any other questions, comments? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
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 Motion does not carry.
What are you suggesting?
Either what our guidelines cover is standing seam or going back to shingles,
Can we do that certificate of appropriateness if I just bring back a different type of material?
Yeah, we can, I can put you on the next agenda with that revision.
You
What
want
about
to
the
do, you want
color?
to do it tonight, you mean?
Yeah, we could adjust it tonight to the other type of material, and then I just have to ask the owner if she can afford to do it or not.
Sure. What material would you do? The standing seam?
Yes.
Okay.
Standing seam copper. If her budget will
Right.
hold up to it, we'll do that. Otherwise, she might not do anything.
Someone needs to make a motion to modify the motion. Who made the motion? Judy? You want to make a motion to modify the change of material to standing seam, copper color?
Standing seam?
Standing,
Standing seam.
copper.
A motion is made in changing the structure of the copper to a standing seam material in a darker color.
or copper.
Copper
Or copper.
metallic, please.
I'm sorry, or copper, correct.
Maggie, you want to second that since you?
Yes. Second.
Maggie, second the motion again. All in favor of a standing seam roof that's done in copper, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
It's copper,
Painted,
sorry,
copper painted color.
Be like the Presbyterian Church.
I would like to see an actual sample of the product, not just a color. So I would say no as it currently stands.
Okay, so we have 3 yeses and a no, and I will add my vote as a yes, so it'll be 4-1. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Travis, you just let me know if we need to revise this further, and I can get you on the next agenda.
Should we bring up this issue that someone did not conform to what we approved? Is that what you described?
It's beyond our jurisdiction, so that's what I've been told. But it doesn't stop me from voicing my opinion.
I think it's more than an opinion. If it should come up, I would like for it to at some point, and if that time is appropriate at some time.
Right. Number 3, level 2, 15 Amity fence replacement. Do we have anybody here for 15 Amity? All right. You want to state your name and address?
Hello, good evening. I'm KJ Kelly Zumwalt.
Okay.
The residence at 15 Amity is a single-story cottage with folk Victorian details. The applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to replace the existing front fence with iron and stone. And you can see that in the reference photos provided. And they're also seeking to replace the side fence with wood and wire. There's a reference photo of that as well. In evaluating the request for these alterations, staff makes the following findings of fact. The front fence is an appropriate style for both the property and surrounding neighborhood. And the side fence is architecturally distinct and would have minimal visibility and impact from public right-of-way. The proposed alterations align with standards and guidelines. Staff recommend approval of this agenda item. One question that I do have is a clarification of how those 2 fence types adjoin, or if they do.
Sure. Those 2 fence types will adjoin, definitely, and it will come at the corner of the property. So with our property, there's kind of a distinct front, and the road kind of makes a left turn, so there's a distinct front and a distinct side. So we'll have a definite distinct corner, and then down the side of the property will be the wood.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion?
I move that the Historic District Commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work at 15 Amity as proposed.
Second.
Judy made the motion, Marty seconded.
Question?
Question?
I think I missed a detail. What is the proposed height of the fence across the front of the property?
Okay, so what we've taken our sample from is the small part, there will be a retaining wall, like a foot wall, and then there'll be columns or pillars about every 12 feet with the wrought iron in between.
Right, I saw your photo.
Okay.
Right.
So total height,
Yeah.
the iron fence is 3 feet high, so the retaining wall will be 1 foot, 48 inches
Okay.
across the front.
So the garden wall, which can be 2 feet, even without our approval, and then you're talking about a fence which is 36 inches on top of that.
Yes, sir.
And it must, according to our guidelines, be no more than 42 inches, is what I'm hearing you
Correct.
say.
Okay, 42 inches, so we will, okay, we can certainly adjust that.
Well, I'm saying that you are within that.
Oh, we're within that,
If you're
okay.
proposing 36 inches for that part of the fence, then I'm saying, the
Correct.
guidelines say no more than 42 inches, so,
Okay,
It's 48 inches high, rather.
yes, including the garden.
Correct.
Right, so I guess the question then is how do we measure the 42 inches?
One comment I do have is the guideline for fences, B, and I could be missing it, but the only height
42 inches.
that I'm seeing is for new wooden fences, including picket designs, must be a maximum of 42 inches tall.
In the front, yes.
So I don't see a set height requirement for a iron fence. Is that,
I thought it was a given that covers all fencing, but
okay,
It's the fact that it's across the front of the property.
We're still okay with what she said.
okay.
we're still good.
So what I'm not, I'm just speculating here that, I don't know, are we saying that some of us, are we interpreting this as 42 total? How are, I think you need to understand how we might be interpreting that so that we can give you what you're.
Yes, sir.
What they indicated that they want is very similar to two fences that were put up on Armstrong Street, which is a much more trafficked road than Amity. And the ones on Armstrong Street are significantly higher than this one would be. So precedent has been set, as far as I understand. And
It
this,
depends when those fences were put up.
sorry,
Do you know when those fences were put up?
how long ago?
Yeah,
Probably 2015, 16,
5 years ago?
yeah, maybe 6 years ago.
Any more questions, comments?
And there was some controversy at the time, but the commission opted to let them go ahead, and they did put up significantly higher pillars. They did destroy freestanding walls, and that was deemed okay. Were you here then, Steve?
Yeah.
When that happened?
I do remember that, yeah.
Yeah,
That was quite a
yeah.
problem, discussion. Anything else, anybody? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. 4-0, passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Should be quite the improvement.
Okay. Number 5, level 2, 22 Eccles, add shed. Do we have anybody here for 22 Eccles?
The residence at 22 Eccles is a non-contributing single-family residence with plain traditional styling. The applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to add a 10-foot by 16-foot shed to the northeast side of their yard. In evaluating this request, staff makes the following findings of fact. The proposed shed can reasonably be considered reversible on this property, and it aligns with standards and guidelines, so staff recommend approval of this agenda item.
What's the size of the shed?
The
10
size?
10 by 16.
Yeah, 10 by 16.
Paperwork says 12 by 24.
But we're not, we're on 5.
Am I the wrong one?
Or we have both.
Oh, I'm
On,
sorry. I looked at a postpone. Okay, sorry about that.
the specs for the shed can be found, item 5, page 6.
Yep.
Okay. I hear a motion?
I move that the Historic District Commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work at 22 Eccles as proposed.
Second.
Judy made the motion, Maggie seconded. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, there's one thing that's unclear in my mind about the guidelines, and that is any specs or anything about sheds that are just brought on site and just, that are not constructed, but that are just brought and placed on site.
Prefab,
Right, the kind of stuff that you see by the dozen.
just dropped off and
Yeah.
and it's already pre-made and everything.
And I mean, I have my opinions about that, but I wonder what if anything, the guidelines say that should or should not, or shall not be done.
Prefabricated structures aren't outlined specifically. They're all lumped together as ancillary structures. So the requirements for that would be a 2/3 setback from the front facade and located where that type of structure would have been historically.
Right,
So
right.
that's literally all that is mentioned.
Is that something we need to address?
We've approved these sheds many times, so. Usually, the preference is they be behind the house, they look sort of, they blend in with the house. A lot of times people will paint them to match the house and stuff.
This one clearly conforms to the setback,
Right.
but it's also clearly visible from the street
Yes.
as well.
yes.
So by the letter of the law, we've got what we're supposed to have.
Right.
On the other hand, we have our opinions about whether that's all there is to it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Ready for a vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 What is the depth of the water garden?
We're doing a
we're-
vote right now, so.
Yeah, we're on item 5.
Sorry?
We're on item 5.
Oh,
4 was postponed.
oh, they approved the water garden, okay. Whatever.
That was postponed. We're on item 5. We're taking a vote. Judy?
No.
Marty?
I haven't looked at the picture yet.
Okay.
I would say no.
Motion fails 2-2.
No.
So any guidance for this applicant for the future? Anybody?
That's what I'm wondering. Do we, and can we? I could see relocation being an option. I could see, again, prefab is not addressed, but I wonder if that should be or could be relevant.
I would recommend proposing a relocation, considering the cost of prefab versus, actual stick construction. That is a consideration that you
Yeah.
have to make, and especially since prefab is not addressed in the guidelines currently.
My take on it at the time, and this is just my opinion, was that the property is quite large, and the location, the proposed location was, though it had a proper setback, there are reasons to say that its location to the north, was a little bit, I think, inappropriate. But I think relocation to be more behind the house, from my own perspective, would really pretty much answer the question if that jibes with the guidelines.
Okay.
I agree completely with Randy.
Would
If it's
anybody-
possible to put it to the back of the house.
Would anybody be okay with amending the motion and amending the COA? And then if the applicant is, since they're not here tonight, if they're okay with that, we'll go with that. If they're not, we can readdress it at a later meeting.
I think we would need to be fairly prescriptive, though, in what we would say that needs to be. I don't know if we want to do that right now. I'm open to doing that. I just don't know that right now.
I'd kind of like to see where they want to put it.
Pardon me?
I would want to see where they want to put it.
Yeah.
If it's possible for them to put it to the back, the reasoning for it being on the side of the house, maybe they're unable or don't have enough width.
No, there's plenty of width, I think. The lots.
I do too.
Yeah.
It may not meet their purpose for some reason. I would suggest they come back and then tell us where they're going to put it. Okay, so the vote stands. So number 6, 221 spring fence replacement.
Fence, number 6.
Carl Dorman, 221 Spring Street.
No.
Oh, no, sorry.
The residence at 221 Spring Street is a non-contributing single-family residence. The applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to replace the wooden picket fence with 36-inch black ornamental steel. In evaluating this request, staff makes the following findings of fact. The proposed fencing is of appropriate style for the building and neighborhood. The proposed alterations align with standards and guidelines. Staff recommend approval of this item.
I move that the Historic District Commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the work at 221 Spring as proposed.
Second.
Judy made the motion, Randy seconded. Any discussions, questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Number 7 was postponed. Okay. Open the file. Where 7 ends, number 8 begins.
At the cabin lot.
That's the last approval, level 2 approval.
Okay,
Yep.
that's it.
Except for the discussion.
Wow. This is all number 8? Where's other stuff? Cool. So the last thing on our new business is discussion of cabin at Historic Museum. Is that you, sir?
Yeah, am I good
Okay.
to start? Okay.
Yeah, you're
It's kind of hard to see out there.
Yeah, I'm
see a
sorry,
figure,
I
so-
apologize. This is my first time appearing before the HDC, so I'm
You're doing
kind of new to
great.
this. So my name is Jeff Downos. I'm the new director at the Eureka Springs Historical Museum down on South Main Street. I've been there about, I think about 5 months now, and shortly after I started, we did have a very large tree that fell down the hill and landed on the cabin. It pretty much took out most of the roof as well as one of the walls. In doing my research, I understand this has been an issue before. The cabin has come before the HDC before. And I also understand that, I guess in 2020, Bobby Ray had looked at it. He had deemed it a safety hazard at that point. Unfortunately, he did not come out to look at it again after the current damage that is there. I kind of hoped he had so that I could get an update on his opinion on the condition of the cabin. Although we do believe that it is still a public safety hazard, and in fact, much more so now at this point. I've been struggling to try and figure out what to do with this. This kind of landed in my lap right as I started the job. I have no experience whatsoever with log cabins. So I've been reaching out to different companies to try and figure out, what are our options here? What can we do? I don't know if this is a typical request for somebody coming before the HDC. I see everybody else has, level 1s and 2s and things like that. But I just figured, you're the ones that I think could help guide us through this and maybe help us figure out what we can do going forward with the cabin. I did talk to, let's see, I called several companies. I only found one so far that was willing to come out and look at the cabin for us. I spoke with a company called Log Medics. They specialize in cabin restoration. In discussing the cabin with them and telling them about it, they actually said it was more than they could handle, more than they typically do. They referred me to a man named Joe Birmingham with 3B's Construction, said he was the best cabin person in the area. He's a master craftsman, and that if we got lucky and he was willing to come and look at it, he would be our best shot to give us, excellent advice on what to do, what we could do with it, and what it might cost to take care of it. He came out and looked at it and essentially said the primary issue is that the materials that he would need to restore it are not there. So it pretty much would have to be rebuilt, is what's going to happen. And the main reason, I guess, for that is that the logs at the bottom of the walls are rotten. So that's not even including the damage from the tree that fell on it. The very bottoms of the walls are completely rotted out. So it sounds like it would have to be taken down in order to do anything at all with it. He also gave me an estimate to do that, and it's much more than the museum can afford. I can tell you as the director, that estimate came in at $80,000 to $90,000. I have been trying to find a local person who might be able to give us another estimate, something hopefully a little lower, and also trying to figure out, are there other options? What else can we do? Because it's my understanding that in the past, there's been issues with maintenance of the cabin. It was not maintained properly. The museum did not have the budget to maintain it properly. It's also my understanding, based on discussing the cabin with Joe Birmingham, that there are some design flaws in the way that the cabin was sited and located right next to the hill. There was a deck built right next to it that funnels a lot of the water whenever it rains right up against the wall. And
Is this the original location? Or was
no,
it...
and that's the other thing that I've discovered is that the museum, I guess, has tried to get grants in the past to try and work on the cabin and maintain it, but because it's not in its original location and it's not entirely original to begin with, I guess it was kind of piece-parted together and relocated. It was taken down from Mill Hollow in 1998, and it was moved to the Eureka Springs Historical Museum location in 2000. But I also understand that it was moved to Mill Hollow, so Mill Hollow wasn't the original location either. I understand it was somewhere closer to Blue Spring. So I feel like as the director, my hands are tied here. I don't know what to do. I feel like the costs are prohibitive, and even if we could get the cabin rebuilt, like if we were to do a big fundraiser or something, there's no money to maintain the cabin. We're struggling right now with the museum itself, the building itself. We just finished having a bunch of grant work done, or they're finishing up now, but I still have roof leaks that I'm dealing with at the museum. And so I know that there's been situations where, you're looking at the cabin and you're looking at the museum building, and we only have so much money, and we've prioritized the museum building. And it's not something that I'm thrilled about. I mean, like I said, I wasn't here, so I've kind of inherited this mess. But I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this and what we can do. We have had another idea, in talking with Joe Birmingham and some of the board members, we have to figure out a way to preserve the cabin somehow, to preserve the historic value, because it was Cora Pinkley Call's writing cabin. And so, another idea was, well, if we can't afford to completely rebuild it, could we do some sort of a pavilion where we reuse the logs that are, if there's enough logs that are still in good enough shape, could we rebuild something and keep the fireplace that's there? Because the fireplace is in decent shape. So we're throwing around a lot of ideas. We're trying to figure out something to do, but I guess, it's my understanding that we've come before the HDC before, and I feel like things have changed a little bit, but I kind of wanted to get your feel on it and see maybe if you could give me some sort of guidelines, because, like I said, I don't know what to do with this because I don't have the money to fix it. And in the meantime, it's a liability. I mean, it's sitting there, it's in bad shape. We've had problems with people vandalizing it. We've had to put plywood over the door because somebody keeps kicking in the door. So I guess, like I said, I need your help. I need to figure out what we can do here.
Has part of the discussion with Joe involved fixing it, rebuilding it, but in a different location?
No.
I mean, if you're going to have to dismantle it, then you could theoretically build it back in some other location appropriate, maybe across town, maybe in a place that would be more central and would be higher profile.
Well, I know that, I guess a few years ago, the board informed me that Crystal Bridges was actually interested in purchasing the cabin at one point.
To move
it to the, was it the Amazium? At the Amazium, they were going to actually have it inside the Amazium. But I guess the estimate to do that came in at close to $70,000, and so they walked away from that idea. So it's come up before. It's not something I discussed with Joe, though. But it does sound to me like, regardless of what happens, it's going to have to be brought down in order to assess which logs are good and which logs are not good. And in the meantime, I don't know what to do with it.
So it seems to me that you've got something that needs to and really has to come down.
Well, it sounds like it, yeah. But it has sentimental value, obviously, to us because of its historical value.
Yes.
But that's only my first clause, and that is that it can't stay exactly like it is, because it won't stay exactly like it is. And so something has to happen to it one way or the other. And to me, I've never stepped up to it. I drive by it often, and every time I see it, I think it's part of what I think of when I think of South Main Street. I think it would be a horrible thing for it to completely disappear. And what I am wondering is, if it's a hazard, if it has to come down, I would like for something to come back up with its materials, either in that location or somewhere else, not necessarily the exact same thing, but something that is reminiscent of what that thing has been, even if it isn't exactly the same sort of thing. So I don't know what that is.
Right.
What I'm saying is, I don't know any more than you do. I know much, much less. But I have very strong feelings about that and its value.
Right, and I feel like, and I think that, like when Joe was talking about like a log pavilion that's in the same shape as the cabin, but, keeps the fireplace where it is, and maybe we could put some historical markers or something. I feel like, at least from my limited knowledge with the museum, because again, I've only been there 5 months, but that to me would be, if we could do something like that, it would be more of a usable structure for us, because I wouldn't have to maintain it as a cabin that I can't use right now.
It could be an occupiable space by the public as well.
Correct, yeah. We could put some picnic tables in there or something like that. Again, we're just kind of spitballing ideas right now, and I did try and get a hold of, I tried to work with Sal Wilson. He's a local timber framer. I don't know if you know Sal, but he's been out of town for a bit. But he did express an interest in, talking with me about that idea, about trying to figure out a way to repurpose it, maybe add some timber framing or something like that. But like I said, it's just kind of a quandary right now, and all I know is that in the meantime, we've got this liability, and it's an eyesore, that's just sitting there.
I have an idea or two that I would bring up sometime to you. Just, again, it's spitballing, but I could see it as an idea generator, if nothing else, and I'll share that with you at some point.
So I wonder for this commission, would they need to do a demolition order and then reuse the materials in something else? Because it sounds like it's not going to be a cabin anymore.
Well, like I said, unless by some miracle I can find somebody to do it for really cheap, and we find a way to have a permanent, revenue source that can maintain it.
And the history here is Ken Turner did come to us a while back asking to have it demolished and saying that the museum did not have the money to fix it or maintain it. The commission was pretty upset that and I know probably everybody on the board wasn't there when the cabin was accepted, but it's like, well, why'd you take something that you can't even be a good steward to maintain it?
Right.
So it was given to you to take care of, and then you didn't, and now you just want to tear it down.
Yeah,
so.
and I understand that tonight. Like I said, this has been not something fun for me for, a brand new job, but.
And we understand that, and but at that point, we just said, no, we're not going to let you tear it down.
Yeah. And I
please go
understand-
back and try to figure something out.
Right, and I think part of it too, like the other thing that I didn't know about really was the fact that, like Joe confirmed, that there is a design flaw in the location of it, and something needs to be done about the water that comes off that hill, I guess, because even if we were to rebuild it, he said that would have to be redesigned or addressed, because otherwise we'll be in the same situation.
Right. I think Ken mentioned that as well.
My concern is basically, like you had mentioned previously, is the safety and insurance, and something happening to someone that could get in there, especially with our high tourist season being the next and past month and the following months. For the public safety and the welfare, I think, in my opinion, it would be appropriate that you have to dismantle it. There's no option there. But what to do with the cabin itself once it is dismantled would be subject to the Historic Museum Board to come back with some ideas.
Right.
Kylie?
So I have a question. I'm just trying to better understand this situation. So I guess the best way to say it is, what value do you place on the cabin in the future? Is it an interpretive tool? Is it merely being preserved because of that sentimental value?
It's my understanding that in reading some of the original, notes from when they transferred the cabin to its current location, that the hope was that the cabin could be utilized for, like tea parties and, exhibit, presentations, small groups of people could go in there and they can make presentations. I don't see that that's been done, at least not for a very long time. And my only guess is that it's a budget thing. It's basically, you'd have to be able to staff a second location. And I can tell you right now, like at the museum, there's me and I have one employee.
Yeah.
And that's it, and so, and in addition to that, there's no electricity, there's no heat and air or anything like that. So, you're already limited, in certain times a year, I guess, with what you could do with it. I'd like to find a use for it, that type of a use for it that contributes, aside from it just being something that we can look at and say, oh, that's Cora's cabin. But
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, because like I said, I don't feel like I have a budget to staff it or put, special programs or features or anything like that in there.
Yeah, and I think that, and for those of you who don't know, I am the Historic Preservation Officer for the city. So my background is in historic preservation, but I think kind of the pivotal question for you and your board is, what is the ultimate reason the cabin was moved here? And if it was to be a usable space, maybe that same area would be better used without the cabin occupying it. Because at this point, unfortunately, you're dealing with such a loss of material that the preservation value is pretty low. So unless you're willing to put in for a complete restoration, that's kind of a tricky situation. And I think that, with the electricity and all of those other things, it honestly sounds like a pavilion or some other open structure would still provide that community space. You could still incorporate some of that historic material and even interpret the construction of a log cabin without having an entire log cabin. There's a state park, I believe it's Davidsonville, that has ghost structures that it's essentially a metal fabricated building in the same footprint, same height, that you could stand inside there and it has the visual impact of what that building would look like. They haven't incorporated historic materials as part of that interpretation, but I think, that's another idea for interpreting, in general, log cabin construction in the Ozarks without having to shell out a bunch of money or have a cabin that's unsafe and not usable. So,
Well, I'd like to get with you after this and
yeah, for sure.
get some details on that, because any idea that we can come up with, because I don't want to lose it in its entirety. Even if even if it's just the chimney there with historical markers and a pavilion around it or something like that, it's better than the whole thing just coming down and disappearing. But in the meantime, like I said, I didn't know what to do. So
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
May I?
Sure.
In my dreams, I fantasize about being able to speak the language that Kylie does of historic preservation. I can't. But I do have an architecture. I work in architecture, and the term that she just used was the term ghost. To me, I don't understand some of the parameters that Kylie thinks within. Instead, I think about the spirit of that place. I think about what it has been, I think about what it is that people who would be in it now can experience that has that throwback, that has the ghost present to it. And I think that's where the potential lies. I don't want to propose any sort of design idea. That I wouldn't want to do that now, and I wouldn't want to, I would want to be a part of a conversation like that, but I would want it to be a much bigger conversation among people that are much better designers than I am. But what I'm saying to you is that that there is a soul to that place that I think we shouldn't lose, even if half of the logs are almost dirt. The thing is that there's a soul there that I think we want to hold on to.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be in the same location, and it doesn't have to look like, well, I would think that you would at least would have a memory of what that thing is when you see it, but this is a really, really big question. And I wouldn't want to, $10,000 or $20,000 to steer the conversation, to steer the result too powerfully in one direction or the other. I just think it needs to be, in my mind, it's a design question first. And only because, I say that only because I don't speak Kylie's language. She's got her view on it too, which is equally valuable, if not more.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Hope that helps.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
Sure. There's no consent agenda for tonight. Administrative approval by City Preservation Officer, applications for repair and work involving no changes in materials plus changes in roofing, paint colors, and signs. Number 1, all level 1s, 38 Spring, paint color, Moran. And number 2, 28 Fairmont, Flagstone Walkway, Anderson. Number 3, 2 Kings Highway, repair, replace wood rot, and in-kind Walcott. Number 4, 115 West Van Buren, paint color, Landmarks, Eureka Springs, LLC. We have a motion to accept. Can we do the motion to accept that, or is that? Yeah. No, it's consent agenda. I always get mixed
Yeah.
up. Okay, never mind. Commission business, treasurer's report.
This would be my first time reading it. Is it just that you want to read that there's been no activity?
Sure.
Except for a small...
I think you could just say the balance and that there's been no activity.
Okay, there's been a small deposit from interest of 77 cents, and the current balance is $9,000.86 plus 19 cents.
Okay,
77 cents.
I think that's what we earned
thank you very much, Maggie.
We earned it.
We are
in the month of July.
Dakota Group Meeting Summary. Kylie?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had to finish this up right before the meeting.
Okay.
So this is just an executive summary over the project launch meeting that I participated in with Dee and then the 3 consultants with the Lakota group. So on here you'll see a outline of what we discussed. Obviously we met them and kind of determined what each person's roles would be. We reviewed the objectives that they typically apply to design guideline revision projects, and then some things that Dee and I had noted as well, and then some general issues with guidelines as written, the application of them, how useful are they, what are some guidelines that omit certain things like the sheds, for example. So we, on a very, very high level, went over some of that just so they could have a jumping off point. We also reviewed the project schedule. They proposed starting fieldwork in September, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just one second. And then reviewed the work plan as far as key milestones and deliverables that they proposed. One really exciting thing that we should be getting pretty soon is their engagement plan. So obviously, you all as HDC are serving as the project steering committee, but a big part of that engagement between you all, the public, and the consultants is stakeholder engagement. So their engagement plan will outline that in more depth, but something that I need input from all of you, since I'm not as familiar with the citizens here, is who do you think would be a valuable resource as we start this process? We are going to be having stakeholder interviews, which would be a one-on-one, what has your experience with application of guidelines been like? What are some flaws? What are some great things that work really well? On a case-by-case basis to try to get kind of a broad view of how they work and how they don't work and what the citizens would like to see from them in the future. So I need help from you all to get contacts for folks that we would like to invite to be part of those interviews, and folks that we would also like to be part of a focus group through the duration of this project.
And how many people are you looking for? Approximately 12, 6?
I mean, I think that's something that we can be flexible on, and I don't have a set number. They didn't propose a set number.
Are you looking for people who have local experience and can bring those stories, or are you looking for people from other locations, or a combination of those, perhaps?
I think the intent with this is citizens of Eureka Springs, people with local experience. That being said, I don't think there's anything that is keeping other people with experience in historic preservation, design, all of those things out of this process. I think that would be really valuable.
I think it would be at least as bad. I mean, I think that's part of what we need is a breath of
Yes.
fresh air from the outside to help us with that. And I would say if it could be even 50-50, that would be, in my opinion, potentially more valuable.
Yeah, no, I think it would be great. I think that and it could be that we have multiple focus groups that are essentially, like you're getting different perspectives from each group, and then you can take what you can from each of those opinions. But I welcome any recommendations for people that we want to make sure know about those meetings and get a personal invitation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just one second. Another part of this engagement plan is a project brand and a dedicated page on our new website to provide information to the public about the project, how it's going, opportunities for them to be involved, to give feedback on drafts, things like that. So they'll be using our branding, which should be coming soon. I would say in the next 2 weeks, we should be getting some drafts that you all will get to pick from or make modifications to, and then they will take that and make a project brand. So that's really exciting. I'm hoping to launch the website after our next meeting. I'm hoping to present that to you and get the okay, and then that site will go live. They also asked for data to help them as they do this. I've already given them everything that they've asked for. And then the other exciting thing that they're offering is GIS and mapping, which is something that the entire city really does not have. So they'll be providing updated maps, layers, and then metadata that we can use later, which metadata is all of the important information in a map. So if you had a layer that was contributing resources, the metadata would be, if you click on the auditorium, for example, it would pop up with when it was constructed, who built it, all of that kind of good to know information. So they'll be helping us out with that. But What we have on the horizon, September 20th through 24th, they will be coming down from Chicago to do their field work. And they've asked us to identify any properties that we think need more attention, them to take a careful look at. This could be properties that we think are super significant and need to be outlined really clearly in guidelines.
Because they're at risk, or what purpose?
Either they're at risk or they're really great examples of a certain type of architecture, or properties that maybe have had work that's not compatible, that has been considered contributing but really maybe isn't, those types of things. So one broad category I would like them to take a look at is properties that were constructed 1955 to 1971, because those are properties that would be considered now of age. They're over 50 years. And the last survey was done in 2005. So the contributing versus non-contributing list that you all work off of is pretty outdated at this point. So I'm hoping that they'll have a chance to give us some help with how to approach those. So any other properties that you all can think of, start sending those to me, and we'll make sure that they're aware of them.
And not to derail this, but that era that you just mentioned, I think, is critical because they are coming of age. Now, when we look back at 1900, there were plenty of awful structures back then, and they let them go and they're gone.
Yes.
The ones that were worth preserving were the ones that were retained. But even our guidelines say there are buildings that, were built in a certain era that are plain or awful or just like, gosh, they're embarrassing. If they were 100 years from now, they would have been let go, but we can't let go of them, and maybe we should, or at least, do things. So I'm curious. We're on the cusp of something that's really tricky, and I'm curious what we have to learn about that.
Yeah, I think that that period of structures where you have, it's significant not only because they're newly of age, but that's Eureka's kind of second building boom.
Correct.
And that's a really important moment that we need to capture. And I do think it's going to be tricky because you're going to have to make some choices about buildings that have already had too much change, buildings that aren't the best example of a 1965 ranch, whatever.
Yeah.
So
Are you proposing also to change the border of the historic district? Are we able to include those homes if they're not?
they're already included.
Okay.
So for example, the East Mountain neighborhood has a lot of structures from that time period.
Yes.
They're already within the Eureka Springs Historic District, but that does bring up another interesting point, and another thing that came up in the objectives and issues discussion was by code, the HDC has authority to oversee exterior changes in any historic district in the city. And there's more than just the downtown district.
Absolutely.
So, and that has not historically been applied. So, for example, Lake Leatherwood City Park is a National Historic District, Tall Pines. There's, I think, two other districts, Sanitarium Lake Bridges, which is Lake Lucerne. There are 2 or 3 stone arch bridges that are historic resources. So there's a lot of areas where HDC historically hasn't used their jurisdiction over in the past.
Yes.
And part of that is probably because there aren't clear guidelines for how to approach such a vast array of resources.
Right.
So they're going to help us with that too, and I'm really excited. And I know that, for example, the folks at Parks are really excited to work with HDC to make good decisions about those resources. So that's kind of what we're looking at. So with all of that in mind, be thinking about structures, areas that would be important. I've also included on here a proposed schedule for September 21st. They are wanting to have the stakeholder meetings and an HDC special meeting the evening of September 21st. I proposed 6 o'clock, but if another time works better for you all, we can do that at another time. And that will be outdoors at the tent at Carnegie Library. So we will audio record our special meeting. The stakeholder interviews and stakeholder meetings, we do have kind of a tricky situation where if we have 2 or more commissioners present, we have to record that. It has to be considered a public meeting. And you also have the concern about, are people going to be comfortable enough speaking freely if commissioners are there? So you're welcome to be there if you want to, but in some ways, it might be good if you aren't there for stakeholder meetings and then you come in and have your meeting with the public and the consultants. It's a public meeting, it's recorded. That way we're not breaking any laws, but that's something that we can figure out at a later date. I will need some volunteers a couple times during that day to set up and take down.
I'll volunteer.
Yay! Perfect.
10:30 a.m. setup and the cleanup.
Yes, okay, awesome. And the library has graciously donated their space and their chairs and a projector and a screen, and they're super excited to work with us.
Cool.
The other opportunity is on the 23rd at the farmer's market. I'll need 1 to 2 volunteers
Tuesday.
for that.
What day is the 20th?
The 21st is Tuesday,
Tuesday, okay.
and then the 23rd, the farmer's market, is Thursday.
Thursdays.
I'm out of town the 23rd, so.
Okay, and I don't have to have an answer today, but I'll need
It's not
help.
that far off, so.
Yeah, I'll need help setting up at the farmer's market, and I think we're going to be doing some surveys and some more stakeholder interviews informally at that as well.
Cool.
I have to wonder about my work situation. I mean, I work full-time during the day, and so I may not even be available, but I'm definitely will consider that as something I need to do if I can.
Yeah. And it should be fun. I'm excited to get some more information about, how stuff is working for people and the ideas that, residents have. What's going to work best for them?
Right.
How can we make that happen?
Just off the top of my head, stakeholders, some of the contractors that we see come through over and over and over again, like Travis,
Yeah.
Penny Pemberton, those folks probably get their input because they come up before us quite a bit, and they
Yeah.
probably have more of
Even
a,
Stacy with the staff.
Stacy.
Yeah.
Of course, they're busy people, but, I mean, it
Yeah.
may,
I think it's appropriate to at least extend an
try, yeah.
invitation.
we want your input in this process, and you've gone through the process a lot, so.
Yeah.
Anybody else can think of anything else that we can suggest? Anything else?
And if you think of anybody, you can email me. If you think of structures, email me. But that's all I got for you. And I will say I neglected to put commissioner comments on the agenda, so I apologize for that.
I was going to do it anyway, so. Next meeting will be September 15, 2021. Level 3 applications due Thursday, September 2nd. Level 2 applications due Wednesday, September 8th, 2021. Commissioners' comments. We'll start with Randy.
Just a question about Jeff Damos. Does he understand that we might want to discuss with him on an individual basis? Not because it's individual, but because I want to have follow-up conversations, and he left a little while ago, so.
Yeah, I will email him, and if any of you would like me to provide your contact info, If you'll email me so I have it in writing, that way you can't
Okay.
get grumpy at me later.
I would definitely.
Yeah, I'm happy to give him your contact info so you can
Okay.
discuss this further.
As him approaching the commission, I think he'd have to ask for a demolition order, and then, I mean, he could add what their plans of the future are, but
Yeah, I agree. I think that it would probably be a two-step process, do a demo, and then new construction
right.
later on.
And depends what the new construction, it may not even need to come before us. Is that it, Randy?
I'm sorry?
Are you
Yes,
done?
yes, that's it.
Maggie?
No comments?
Marty? And thank everybody for being here and participating in the process. Hope Dee has a safe trip. Anybody hear a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Randy made the motion, and Judy seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Good night, everyone.